We start by lining 2 strands of yarn in different colors and tying them into a slip knot. This slip knot is temporary, we're not going to count it as a stitch, and we're going to unravel it as soon as we secure the stitches. Place the slip knot on the knitting needle and hold this needle and the yarn tails in your right hand like this. Then place one strand on your left index finger and the other strand on your left thumb and hold both strands with your left middle ring and little fingers, just as we do when we use the long tail cast on method. Now we are ready to cast on stitches. To cast on a knit stitch, move the tip of the needle under the strand that is stretched between your left thumb and the needle, and then move it over the strand that is stretched between your index finger and the needle. Tilt the needle a little bit, catching the strand, and move that strand out from under the strand that is stretched between your thumb and the needle. This is our knit stitch. To make a purl stitch, we're gonna do pretty much the same thing, but a mirror version of these moves. So we go under the strand that comes from the index finger, over the strand that comes from the thumb, tilt the needle catching that strand, and move it out from under the strand that comes from the index finger. Because this stitch is formed by the strand that comes from the thumb, it is in the same color as this strand, unlike the first stitch that we cast on that is in a different color. And the wrap that's formed at the bottom of the stitch shows us that this stitch is a purl. Now we're going to repeat these steps, alternating knits and purls in alternating colors. So to make a knit, we go under the strand that comes from the thumb, over the strand that comes from the index finger, and from under the strand that comes from the thumb. Here's our knit stitch. And then we go under the strand that comes from the index finger, grab the strand that comes from the thumb, and move it from under the strand that comes from the index finger. And we've got a purl. And then we repeat the same steps until we cast on as many stitches as we need. Under, over, out. Under, over, out. And I'm going to cast on 2 more stitches. Just like this. Quite easy. When you're done casting on stitches, twist the strands to keep the last stitch from unraveling as we turn the work. We could stop right here. So we have stitches cast on and the stitches are alternating, and we can start working in double knitting or 2-color brioche or corrugated rib in any of those patterns right away. Just keep in mind that the stitches that show as knits over here are sitting on the needle so that the right leg is at the back of the stitch. That's why when we knit those stitches, we're going to knit them through the back loop in the first row. And that would be the Italian cast-on method. But if you want to make the edge a little bit more rounded and you want to make it a little bit less elastic so it doesn't stretch out, then it is better to work 2 setup rows. And that would be the tubular cast-on method, because these 2 setup rows will form a little tube at the bottom of the edge, and that turns the Italian cast-on into a tubular cast-on. Here's how we do it. The first setup row would be worked with the yarn in the color of the knit stitches. So this stitch shows as a knit, and it is in yellow color in my case, so that's why I'm grabbing the strand in yellow color. And another thing to keep in mind is the type of the needles that we're using. For tubular cast-on method, it is important to use either double-pointed or circular needle, because we're gonna need to slide the stitches to the other tip of the needle after we finish the first setup row. But until we get there, we have to work the first setup row, and it is worked like this. So we take another needle and we knit all knit stitches through the back loop and slip all purl stitches with the yarn in front of the work. So the first stitch on my needle is a knit, and I'm gonna insert the right needle into that stitch from right to left, knitting it through the back loop, then wrap the needle with the yarn, and you can do it with the yarn in your right hand, it will be like this, or with the yarn in your left hand, like this. So it actually doesn't really matter at all which hand you use to hold the yarn, and then you move this wrap through the stitch, knitting it through the back loop, just like this. Then comes the purl stitch, and it's not just a purl, it's also in a different color. We don't want to work it with the yarn in this color, right? We don't want to break the beautiful color pattern that we've just formed. So we bring the yarn to the front and slip the stitch purlwise, inserting the tip of the right needle into the stitch from right to left, just like this. Then we move the yarn to the back of the work again and knit the next stitch, which is a knit stitch. It looks like a knit, so we knit it through the back loop. Another purl, slip it with the yarn in front, and once again, it doesn't matter whether you hold yarn in your left hand or your right hand, the movements are exactly the same. Knit through the back loop, slip, knit, and slip. Then we come to the slip knot. Remember, we are not counting it as a stitch, we are not working it as a stitch, of course, we're just leaving it there. But we need this needle, we need it empty so we can turn the work. That's why we simply slip the stitch, we make sure we move the yarn to the back, and we slip the slip knot to the right needle for now. Why? We can't unravel it right now because half of the stitches are still just fragile wraps. And if we unravel this slip knot, then the last stitch would be really wonky. We don't want that. So we keep the slip knot for now, and we are moving to the second setup row. And this row has to be worked with the yarn in the other color, which is the blue in my case. But okay, it's hanging over here. How do we work with this yarn if it's not at the beginning of the row, right? So instead of turning the work, we're gonna slide the stitches to the other tip of the needle, just like this. In my case, it's easy because it's double pointed needle, but if your needle is a circular needle, it will take a bit longer to get to the other end, but it's very easy and not complicated at all. So now we have this working yarn at this side of the work where we need it, and we're gonna work the second setup row. In this row, we're gonna slip all knit stitches with the yarn at the back of the work, and we're gonna purl all purl stitches using the yarn in the same color as the purl stitches. So we bring the yarn to the back, slip the first stitch, which is a knit, slip it purlwise, then bring the yarn to the front and purl the next stitch. Again, it could be yarn in right hand or left hand, the purling is absolutely the same. Then we repeat the same steps. Yarn at the back, slip. Yarn to the front, purl. Slip and purl, slip and purl. And now all stitches are perfectly secured. We worked all stitches, none of them are gonna unravel right here at the cast on edge, unless we drop a stitch, of course, but we're not gonna do that, right? Instead, we are confidently dropping the slip knot and unraveling it. Here we go. No slip knot. The edge is secured. It's perfectly elastic, but not too much, because we worked those two setup rows. They slightly constrain the elasticity of the fabric, and we need that in some cases. For example, when we are working a hat in two-color brioche, right? So we need this restraint a little bit. Otherwise, you can use this cast on in all possible situations when you need to make double knitted fabric or two-colored fabric, like double knitting, two-color brioche or corrugated ribs. And no matter whether you chose to work 2 setup rows or not, and as you work a few rows, you will see that this cast on flows seamlessly into the main fabric of the project, making your project fully reversible. Just look at this beauty. If you find this tutorial helpful, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to be notified every time I publish a new video. Happy knitting, my friend. I'll talk to you in the next tutorial.